you often do think, you know, what would things have been like, what would life have been like, but you can't change it. You have to, the only thing now we can do, as I keep saying, is build a better society going forward.
His mother survived St Patrick's Mother and Baby Home, where his sister died. He was placed in the controversial Madonna House and was used in a vaccine trial. He was separated from his mother for most of his life. This is Francis Timmons' story.
My name is Francis Timmons. I lived in Madonna House institution, one of the so-called county homes in Dublin, run by the Sisters of Charity, and I was also involved with the vaccine trials. My mother was from Ballyfermot. She had a child, I understand, somewhere around the 1960s, the late 60s. She had a daughter, and the daughter and herself lived in St Pat's on the Navan Road. Again, I'm not so sure, but I know my sister died, and she died at around the age of 3. And we haven't been able to locate where she's buried, or we haven't been able to locate a death cert for her, so we don't actually know how she died. But from reading between the lines and from the little bit of information I have, it was to do with neglect and malnutrition. So my mother went on then to have my older brother in 1969. And then I was born in 1972, and then she had another son, my other brother, in 1973. So that's, like I said, they were from Ballyfermot. They were from a very average working class background. I suppose at the time they would have believed the structures of the church and the state that were in place. My mother wasn't married and never married. In later life she did want to marry, but she didn't. She never managed to find somebody, I suppose, to get married to. So my sister, my older brother and myself have the same father, and then my other brother has a different father.
And did you ever meet your dad?
No, we've never met him. Yeah, again, I'd have an idea who it is. He is married now, and I suppose I kind of felt, Alison, that I wouldn't... I suppose at this stage I'd like a picture of him, but I wouldn't like to go to where he lives and is married, and yeah, I don't know the full setup there. It's not saying I'll never do it, but at the minute I've left it. I've kind of put it on the long finger. Curiosity someday might lead me to do it, but no, not at the minute. I believe he lives in the Wexford area, and he was a horse dealer. That's what I know about him.
Does he know about you, do you think?
I would imagine so, because it wasn't an affair that lasted. You know, there was 3 children came out of this. There was my sister and my brother and myself. So I would imagine he did. And yes, I mean he would have visited my sister in the hospital, because I have a little letter that my mother wrote, and when she died, obviously I got it. And she speaks about her daughter, and that's how I knew she died at the age of 3. And they couldn't say her. That's what she said in the letter, and she kind of felt that she was in heaven, and she was hoping, praying to her, and that. My mother was very religious, so she would have believed anything that the church told her, to be honest.
How old was your mum?
When she died, she was 64, so when she gave birth to me, she was 21. So
very young.
Yeah, I have a picture of her here. That's just after she gave birth to me. That would have been around the time. So yeah, she was very young. Yeah, she's very similar. A lot of people say that. Like, she was a very kind of person. She would have given anything to anyone, you know, if she'd money or cigarettes, or she smoked, and she'd hand everything away. She didn't want anything in life, so she was that type of person. My grandmother, who I met, I was very lucky, Alison, because I met my grandmother as well, and they were the type of people that would have given away stuff. They didn't want much, or they didn't need much in life. But they did believe that the church were all-knowing, and that anything the church said you needed to follow. Okay. I was baptised into the rites of the Catholic Church, and then brought to Madonna House in Blackrock.
And you were only a baby?
Yeah, I was a baby. Now, the mothers didn't stay in Madonna House. They stayed in St Pat's on the Navan Road. So my mother would have been with me, brother and sister. But in Madonna House, my understanding is that St Pat's was full at the time. So that's why I was in Madonna House. That's why they brought me there. There wasn't space. There was more space in Madonna House. So the overflow, if you like, went to Madonna House, which was run by the Sisters of Charity. So I went there in 1971. And
would you have only been a few weeks?
A few weeks old, yeah. And I was there, and a report came out. My understanding, again, from the bits and pieces that I've got, a report came out about a year later that the place wasn't suitable for children. So there was plans to build a new Madonna House. So anyway, that was approved by the government at the time, and they built a new facility. And of course there was much kind of, this will be much better, the care of the children will be much better, facility, because they spoke about children not having play space and not enough food and all this type of stuff. So anyway, the new place opened, and that was the year 1973. That was the year that I was used in the vaccine trials, which I was used in the August 1973. I was 1 in 19 that had the DTP vaccine trial, and 1 in 30 that had the Trivax study. That was a few weeks after the first one. So, and then again, this was years later. I found out that I only found this out a few years ago, Alison. I didn't obviously have memories of that. I do have memories about crying and being very sick, and for years, I suppose it's passing of time, you wonder, are they memories? Are they things that you've heard other people talking about? So you kind of begin to doubt yourself. So anyway, when I did manage to get my records eventually, on it, my mother it's on record and it's recorded down. Nothing about the vaccine trial actually on the Sisters of Charity's record, but what they wrote on the thing was that my mother had come in and she was very concerned that I had scabs on my arm. And this was the same time, it links in with the same time as the vaccine trials. So for years I wondered, had she given, because the issue of consent came up. Now that seems to be in the latest Commission of Inquiry report. They seem to have acknowledged that the mothers didn't give any consent. So that's kind of something I probably already knew, to be honest with you, but it's just confirmed now. It's another piece confirmed. So yeah, she was very worried, very concerned. But the Sisters of Charity would have dismissed her. She was only the mother. She wouldn't, what would she know? So that was the attitude, you know what I mean? So she was very concerned, and it has that in it. There was another time she came into Madonna House and we were out the front. She was allowed to bring me out the front of the grounds, and of course my mother, being my mother, brought me off to, she had a flat in town at the time, and she went off and brought me up to the flat. And it's in the records. The guards had to be called. The guards had to get me back to Madonna House, because obviously there was no law. She hadn't broken any law, but so it gives an indication of the times we were living in, because she couldn't have the child, even though it was her child. And it wasn't, it was at no harm or anything, it was. So I was brought back to Madonna House. And then another time I was brought up to the children's section up at St. Kevin's. And that's again recorded down, because I do have memories of that. And the nuns dragged me out, my mother, and brought me back to Madonna House. And I was crying hysterically. And I do have vague memories of that as a child. So that was fairly horrendous. But when I got back, and that's what I've said loads of times, like, they didn't really want to listen to you crying or listen to your tears, because they weren't really that bothered, to be honest with you. So like, the memories of Madonna House would be of a very harsh regime. That's the way I would describe it. And I think the minister said that during the Commission of Inquiry there about county homes in general, that they were very harsh, and it's probably the best word to use it. There was no care in the place. There would have been very militant, I suppose, for want of a better word, and it was a dreadful place. So and years later, I managed to speak to somebody that worked there, and had actually done a placement, and she spoke. She sent me a lovely letter, and she spoke about similar, and she would have said that the nun that ran it was particularly harsh, and the children were very upset and was very distressed a lot of the time. So, and that, you know, the mothers desperately wanted their children back, but they weren't allowed. So that was quite horrendous. And she sent me the only picture I have, which is this picture here, but I might show you it. This picture here, she sent me from Madonna House, which was incredible because I had no pictures of when I was a toddler. So this was around the time that I had the vaccine trial. So it gives you an idea that I was only about 2 years of age. So that in itself is horrendous to use a child like that. But so it's nice to have the picture because I did, like I said, I didn't have anything at that stage.
Even as a baby, Francis knew that Madonna House was not a good place.
I was there for the first few years of my life. And what happened was my other brother lived in Madonna House then, my younger brother. He was born in 1973, so he moved into Madonna House. So we were together there. And my other brother then, that was in St. Pat's on the Navan Road, he was fostered by a family. And again, my understanding is that he came to visit me in Madonna House and said he wasn't leaving without his brother. So eventually I went, I was a few years of age, and I went to live with this family. They were living in Blanchardstown at the time, and I moved out to Clondalkin. So I lived with him, but I thought my other brother was coming with us. But of course, you know, which did cause a lot of stress as you got older, because I was kind of under the impression that my other younger brother was coming with us, and I thought that we'd be kept together, you know, but we weren't.
But you were seeing your family a bit?
I was a little bit, yeah. Now, anytime we had, you know, as I went to live with this foster family, and I knew, Alison, I knew that I had a mother, and I knew I didn't need another mother. And I think that was the thing. I didn't want to go to a foster family, but I wanted to get out of Madonna House. I wanted to get out of there. And
even though that's all you knew?
I just knew it was a horrible place, you know. I didn't now be able to describe it better now, but I suppose as a child, you can't put words on these things. You just know that this is not a safe place. This is not a good place. There was no fun in it. There was no laughter. It was, yeah, it just wasn't a nice place, you know. So, and then when I thought I'd come to a foster family, I thought my other brother, maybe in naivety, I thought that he would follow us in a few weeks and the three of us would be together. But that didn't happen. That never happened.
And that would have made the placement easier.
It would have, yeah. In hindsight, of course it would have, Alison. And then, you know, we were in Clondalkin, then we moved to Clondalkin soon after that, not that long after. And I was abused in the house in Clondalkin by one of the foster brothers. And so that, you know, I think kind of the early years would have been fairly traumatic, for want of a better word. They would have been fairly crap, to be honest with you. Now, I have a great life now, but at the time, they were tough years. And I never said anything because I was terrified. I was terrified that I'd probably be sent back to Madonna House, which I knew I didn't want to go back there. So
foster care wasn't good.
No, it wasn't a good experience. And we had limited contact with my mother over the years. We were brought, but anytime we went to visit her, we had visits, which I suppose in one way you can consider lucky. I don't just lucky, but luckier than other people that had nothing or never met their mothers or that. Anytime we went to see my mother, there was a nun sitting in the corner. It was very strange, very awkward. I mean, you couldn't have a conversation. You didn't feel like you just sat there because you didn't know what to be doing really, and there was no kind of communication. You know what I mean? It was just very strange. And even though I was glad to see her, and I you know, I'd be delighted to kind of, I was looking forward to seeing her. And yeah, so, and the other thing that's noted in my records is that I was very unhappy in the placement. But nobody asked why. Nobody asked. And it's in the record of, you know, he seemed very distressed and very, very upset. But nobody came and asked why. And
that's what they're meant to do.
Yeah, of course, absolutely. But no, there was a nun used to visit the house and that, and she didn't, you know, she would talk to my foster parent and go into the sitting room, you know, the good room as we called it, and they talked. There was no kind of how are you getting on, or, you know, it showed.
Their word for it.
Yeah, I wasn't very good at school, but I couldn't have been, because school, like, I just was desperately unhappy, to be quite honest with you. I didn't want to be there. I didn't want to be there at all. But I didn't as a kid. You don't know where you want to be. Now as an adult, I just knew Madonna House wasn't a good experience, and neither was foster care. So, so I kind of rebelled, of course, as I got into my teenage years then. And again, in the records, my foster mother describes me as difficult and challenging, but of course I was going to be, because of everything. And it wasn't up to years later, I was having a drink with my brother, and he said to me, he remembered something about years ago, and he said to me, I saw something, and he said, I'm not sure whether I saw it or whether I thought I saw it, but I have to ask you. And he asked me about the abuse, and I said yes. So it ended up then we don't talk to the foster parents. It wasn't the foster parents themselves that abused us, but it was one of their sons. And when they found out, they just obviously took his side, and that was it. And we were kind of...
So you approached them as you got older?
We did, yeah, we did. We approached them a few years ago, and that ended the relationship, which wasn't very good before that.
Frances was unable to pursue the allegations because of the pressure it could cause.
I mean, you nearly feel, it's very hard to explain, Alison. It's like you don't know any different, and as you get older then you realise, well, they weren't the nicest people in the world, like, but nothing else. So obviously, you know, was I going to live on the street or what, you know, because we were kind of, the nuns used to say that you were so lucky, you know, you're very lucky to have a good Catholic Christian family, you know, that were so good, you know, you're going to have this, and you're very lucky to have that. So why you need to be so thankful every day of your life, you know. Now and on, as you get older, then you can put things in perspective, and you can say, well, actually, no, I don't need to be that. I feel we were let down. I really do. I feel the Timmons family were let down.
There's no support there.
No. My mother could have coped with kids, and she could have done. I mean, you have to think at that time, in the early 70s, there was no social welfare system in place. There was you wouldn't have got a place with kids anyway, because being a single mother just wasn't an option at that time. So yeah, of course they were let down. Of course they were. Nowadays to be, you know, even now I think single mothers are let down, but at least there's some supports there. There's social welfare, so there is some options, even though I still feel that they're very disadvantaged in terms of society, in terms of what we call the norm, and even nowadays. But yeah, so they were, like, as I said, we went to see my mother, and then of course when I turned 18, then I felt, you know, I wanted to see my grandmother in Ballyfermot, so I went up to see her. I have a memory, sorry to go back to, I met my grandfather once, and I was 13, and my mother insisted, we were on this visit out to, I think she was living in Dunleary at the time, and we went anyway, and she insisted that I get out of the house just, you know, at Ballyfermot to say hello, and I was so delighted she did that, because that was the only time I ever met my grandfather. And I went in, and she was banging on the door, saying, no, you have to come out, he's in the care of the state, blah blah blah. Remember this was my 13th birthday, and anyway, we eventually came out, but that's not recorded in the records. What's recorded is that they had everything under control. Everything they didn't, and was I glad they didn't, because that day I was glad that my mother was a feisty woman, and I'm so glad she did that, because otherwise I'd have never met my grandfather. And you know, obviously I think identity is so important, but my grandfather fought in the War of Independence in the country, and as I got older I'm so delighted to have that, even though it was only once, but I was delighted to have that chance to meet him. And I met my grandmother and my uncles that day. I'd met my grandmother, was on a few of the visits, but again they were like I said, very strange visits, like with a nun sitting in the corner of the room, like, you know, dressed as a nun. And I mean, those days nuns wore full outfits. It was very intimidating for a child. Now nuns don't tend to wear all that, but it was really intimidating and real kind of, you knew that person was there and you better not open your mouth about anything or say anything or just sit there, and you felt a bit stupid nearly, you know. There were awkward visits, very awkward, where after the age of 18, when I went to see my grandmother, and we built up a relationship, and we had a few years from probably 1989 until she died in 94. So we had 5 or 6 years of a good relationship, you know, which was lovely to have, and I would always cherish that. So she was, and then my uncle Eddie was there, and my uncle Michael. So they were built up a relationship with them as well. A strange relationship again, because it's hard to explain to people that if you haven't grown up and you haven't got, you know, you've missed so much in life, birthdays and everything else. But as much as we could, we had a relationship, and it was a friendship as well. And my grandmother apologised several times.
Did she?
Yeah, she was very, very guilty. And she didn't know about the vaccine trials. She didn't. I've only found that out after she died. But she did say she should have done more. Now, you know, I don't blame her, because at the time, you know, I don't think she could have done an awful lot more, because the options weren't there. Like, it was, you know, the priest in Ballyfermot, and everybody was involved, because everybody came in and said, right, single woman, child, right, these are the options. You go into care and that's it, you know, well, so-called care.
Despite losing one child and having 3 taken into care, Mary Timmons never gave up hope that she would get her children back.
My mother got a flat. She used to get flats over the years. She got a flat, say, in Buckingham Street. She was in Shanmagdama Street. She did the rounds, and she used to get, you know, a flat. But her problem was that she would have half of Dublin within, because she was that type of person. She wanted to help homeless people. She wanted to help. She did a lot of troubles. It had a huge impact on her life. Her mental health suffered. She turned to a drink for a long time. As she got older, she gave up drinking. She didn't really drink at all. She smoked, and that was her biggest vice. And even then, yeah, she was on the streets of Dublin for a while. It had a huge impact on her life. And
Francis has nothing but admiration for his mother.
Her smile was incredible. She had the most incredible smile. And she was a very caring type of person. You know, she'd literally, like, I smoked at the time, so if she had 20 cigarettes, she'd give them to you. She was that type of person. And
was she affectionate when she'd see you?
Oh, she always hugged. It was always, I'm so delighted to see you. It wasn't right, Francis, what happened, what they did to me. And, you know, they tried everything. I mean, they tried to put her into psychiatric care. They tried everything, because she was a stubborn woman. She wouldn't sign anything.
So they were trying to adopt you?
Yeah, and she wouldn't sign anything. And she said, no. And she felt that she would get her kids back one day, but it never happened. As soon as she got a flat, and as soon as she got her job, and, you know, but it didn't happen. I mean, the nuns were telling her that, and it wasn't never going to happen, really. But she got her flats, and then she'd lose them, because she would have everybody from the whole of Dublin, anybody that was in need, she'd have found them, and she'd have tried to help them, even though she had so much trouble herself. She was that type of person. And she got a flat up in Fairview one time, and went up, and she thought this was lovely, like a lovely part of Dublin. And she looking over Fairview Park, and she was delighted with herself, you know, the park out in front. And being from Ballyfermot, you know, Fairview was nice area and all. And she was just a very content person in a lot of ways. She didn't need much in life, because there was nothing she needed. You know, she just wasn't that type of person. Material things didn't really mean much to her. But she'd met this guy, Davy, and they were going to get married. She got engaged to him, and he was homeless. And I had met them when he was there. We went to the Ainsley house, celebrated, had a drink with them. And then I left, and she was so happy that day. And then the next time I met her, he had died on the streets, and she was devastated. You know, she thought, because she did want to get married, she wanted to marry somebody, and I think Davy was a bit older than her, but she loved him. She really loved him, and that had a big impact on her as well. And she kind of felt like, you know, she just felt that I suppose the state had kind of forgotten her. So anyway, she, only for the Simon community, who were brilliant, really were, they were so helpful. She ended up in Chester House, up in the South Circular Road, and they were really, she had her own room and a shower. It was a facility, a shared facility, if you like, and she used to tell me she was helping the homeless, and even though she was in it herself, and but she was they told me after she died that she was the most easygoing person. She never, to her detriment really, because when she got pneumonia, she wouldn't, she said, other people, you know, I'm not going to hospital, there'd be people sick there and they'd need help, I'll be all right here, you know. And she was that type of person. She wouldn't, if somebody else was sick, she'd be all over them, helping them.
Mary Timmons was only a young woman when she sadly passed away in 2014.
I got a phone call when I was doing the election. I was running for local council in 2014, and I got a call to say she was up in the Madonna Hospital, and I went up, flew up. We stopped doing the election video. These things don't seem as important when you get a call like that. And we went up to the matter. Well, I went up to the matter, and she was lying in the bed. She had tubes and stuff all out for her at that stage. And I said to the doctor, you know, what's the prognosis? And he said, well, she probably, at that time I didn't realise, I got a bit of a shock, because even though I got a call to say she was sick, they said, well, you know, probably looking at maybe 2 days. And she had, so we went in, and I said, are the tubes helping, or is any of that helping? And he said, no, not really. And she was very agitated. She didn't like stuff like that. And I have to say, Alison, that's the importance of DNA and stuff. I'm the exact same. I hate anything like that. So anyway, we took it all off, and she just sighed of relief, and that she was talking a little bit, you know. And we ended up talking about palliative farmers and the old days and stuff. And so yeah, so she got sicker and sicker, obviously went into coma, and my 2 brothers, one of my brothers came up, and then the other brother came up for a while, and so she saw her 3 sons in the room, which I think was really important. And we got, one of my brothers brought her rosary beads. Of course, she loved her prayers. I never fully understood how she loved the church, but she did. She loved it. And she loved religion. I think she loved God. And, you know, so when she was there, like, she was real, just content, you know, lying in the bed. And I said, you know, you'll be up your mum and dad. And even though I don't really believe any of that, but I said to her, you know, you'll be going up to your parents. So anyway, she died then. And but the last thing I said to her was that she'd done nothing wrong. She'd done nothing, because she hadn't done anything wrong. So
you never felt anger towards her?
You couldn't. Like, she done incredible to give birth to 4 kids. I mean, that's incredible. Yeah. And there's 3 people here today that wouldn't be here only for her. Never felt anger towards her. Or the Timmonses. The Timmonses were, you know, I think they were just typical of the time. And you were controlled by society, controlled by the church. Even, I mean, Alison, even up until the last 20 years, and even still probably to some extent, but definitely up to the last 20 years, we just controlled everything you did. Was, you know, I went to a Catholic school, then I went to another Catholic school. Now, they weren't overly cruel in the schools, I have to be honest. Both schools were okay, but but you were just constantly drummed into you about sins, and you know, everything was a sin. Everything was, if you did this, it's a sin. If you did that, and yeah. So I mean, you were told the normal way to do things was to get married or to join the religious orders. That was the normal. There was no other options, only that. Which of course that's not true, but at the time, so look, there was no. I don't think anger achieves anything really, to be honest with you. I think it's regrettable, I suppose. Like when I went to look for records, that the Sisters of Charity told me they were burnt in a fire, and that wasn't true. So I don't know if they have a picture of my sister. I don't know if they have any other information that they could give us. You know, I think at this stage, that's all we want. We don't want anything else. I've never looked for redress. I could have at the time, the last time after the Ryan report and that, I could have got redress, and I didn't want it.
Why didn't you want it?
I didn't feel. I felt, well, it's not going to change anything for me, and I'm glad I didn't take it, Alison. And I know other people. I'm not saying. I do know people. Some people feel, you know, and that's fine if they feel that that'll help or whatever, that's fine. I have no issue with that. But I just felt, for me personally, it wasn't what I wanted. What I wanted was a bit of truth, a bit of an acknowledgement that, you know, that they were wronged. You know, like even to hear the Taoiseach's apology there, you know, in the Dáil and that, and look, I'm around long enough now to remember Enda Kenny's apology and to remember Bertie Hearn's, and now I've heard them all at this stage, and really they don't mean anything without being honest, and I don't think they've been totally honest. I don't. I think my mum had wrote that apology, by the way. That would have meant something to her. Didn't mean an awful lot to me. Didn't. And I don't think a lot of people can see through that, but it would have, because she would have thought the Taoiseach of the country saying, look, acknowledging, and that's fine, and that's, you know, that's would have helped a bit, but I don't think anything would have helped, because at the end of the day, it's not going to change what happened in the past. But I do think any information that people have, they should be able to get. You know, any information that's there, you know, like I said, if there's a picture or if there's a death cert or whatever there is, we should be able to get that. We should be able to find out those answers.
Despite his difficulties in care, Francis chose not to pursue the issues.
I didn't pursue it. I didn't, I've been honest with you, Alison. I didn't. I saw too many people, and I knew too many people that had their mental health suffered, and the courts were a nightmare, and they just went through. And you know, sometimes I wish I had the bravery to do it, but I just didn't. Let's be honest with you. I felt, no, I was fairly traumatised when I came out. Like, when I got to my 20s, Alison, I was just drinking. I was doing a lot of vodka a day, and it was like self-medicating. It was like, I nearly couldn't get through the day the next day if I didn't have a lot of vodka the night before. And I did this for years. Like, this was, I would say, from the age of 18 up until I met my partner when I was 28. And I honestly mean that. I've said it loads of times. If I hadn't have met my partner when I was 28, I don't think I'd be here.
So you were very hurt.
Oh yeah, I was, yeah. And I still am, but what I've done now is I can cope. I can get on better with life. And I've had a super life in a lot of ways. I've a lot of experience working in different social care. You know what? I think even being on the council, like I'm an elected councillor now, and I think even being on that, I love giving back. I do, but I think that's a real Timmons thing. Like I was saying to you, my grandfather fought in the War of Independence. My uncle was involved with the Troubles in the 80s and stuff, and I think there was always kind of that sense of, you know, doing better and having a better society. So I love that. I love the idea that I can contribute something back, even though, and the other thing I'm very adamant about is that we create a better society, that we don't keep letting this happen. And I know a lot of it does happen today, and I know a lot of kids are let down. But I think going forward, we need a more equal society, and we've done part of that with the repeal of the eighth and the marriage equality, but we need to end direct provision. We need to end these systems. I think in Ireland we're so better up with creating institutions. We have to have an institution for everything, that we need to get rid of them. Have we learned nothing from the past? So if that apologies are going to mean anything, the only way they'll mean something to me is if we stop creating institutions and we look and say, right, what supports do these people need? And it's too easy to kind of nearly say, well, you know, that person can't cope, let's take their kids away, let's put them into care because that's the ideal solution. Sometimes that is necessary, but other times it's not, and we need to look, and we need to be, I suppose, a fairer society. So yeah, I mean, absolutely, to answer your question, I think I've been very lucky in terms of finding a place that I fitted in, and I've been very involved in the community, and I find myself, I'm a very busy person. I don't like my own company. I don't like sitting down. I think if I sit down too often, I just get too morbid, and I start thinking about things that I don't really want to think about, or they're not good to think about, you know what I mean? That it's not a good place to go.
So you do still feel the feelings of the past? Oh
yeah, absolutely. They'll never leave, and they'll never, you know, no matter what. Like, but I don't begrudge anybody a happy life either, you know. I think because I have a very happy life now, as I said. The other thing I wanted to mention was, which was incredible, after my mother died, I of course got curious again. So I thought, and a friend of mine who was illegally adopted, she had done a DNA test, and she was on the TV3 show at the time, and a DNA test, and I thought, oh, I'll do one of these. So I did the DNA test, and I found cousins over in England, and we went over to Birmingham, and it was really so positive. It was really, talking about healing, it was incredible, Alison. I've never, and I was dreading going over, because, you know, you're older and you think, oh my God, what if these people don't like me, or what if I don't like them?
Even though his own life has been challenging, it's his mother who Francis gives his thoughts to.
She didn't have a peaceful life at all, and she struggled then, you know, even to, suppose, fit in, and like, she was all the time looking at, you know, children around and babies that were born, and every time she passed children, she'd be thinking of her own children, you know. But we didn't have a normal relationship. We did have somewhat of a relationship, which I'm very thankful for, but it wasn't a normal mother and son relationship that everybody else would have. Like, I look now with my nieces and nephews and what they have, and it's great, and it's the way it should be. You know, there's no denying that. But we didn't have that. We didn't have that relationship. So, of course, it's had an impact. And it's had an impact even on my relationship with my two brothers, and that all impacts. Now, we get on well, you know, like any siblings, we have our arguments, we have our times. But it has added to the difficulties, you know, particularly if we're a night out together, and then we start talking, and different things come up, you know. And it's not, what I'm thankful for is that I have a relationship with my grandmother.
And Francis now has a wonderful relationship with his extended family.
And we were talking about the Timmonses. They knew nothing about me. They didn't know I existed. But my grandmother had gone over to visit, you know, and we were looking at dates and stuff. So, but she wasn't going to come over and say, you know, I have 4 grandchildren that are in care, in state care. So, anyway, look, we keep in touch now, and we have a relationship, and they sent me this picture of my grandmother and her 2 sisters, and so yeah, it's great to have family, you know, even if it's a bit later. I mean, that was probably 45 years, you know, after I was born that I met them, but
it's the importance of your identity.
Absolutely, identity. I can't stress enough how important it is to know where you came from. Like, my grandmother's brother had only died 6 months before I did the DNA test, and I imagine if I had met, but anyway, I didn't. It wasn't meant to happen. But I was able to see the house where he lived, and I was able to see where my uncle Eddie had died over in Birmingham as well. He'd gone over there, and I knew he had died in Birmingham, but I didn't know that he was visiting relations at the time. So it turned out that we saw many relations over there, and they were just lovely. It was just, I can't wait until after COVID and we'll go back over it again and we'll have another bit of fun and laughter, and we'd so much laughter, so much. And even they'd had a tough life because they had left. We went down, I just did a lot after my mum died. We went down to Kilmullock in Limerick, where my grandmother was from. We visited where my great grandfather was. We found graves. It just did so much, and it was like, now I'm back a few generations, and it's just nice to know. But they had struggled even to look at the previous generations. My great grandfather, my great great grandfather, had been put into a workhouse for robbing potatoes, and because they were that poor, you know, which a lot of half the country was at that stage. And when he was in the workhouse, the conditions were so bad, and he went to burn it down, and it was put into Limerick prison. So, you know, that was his crime, coming from poverty. So it shows kind of how we treated people, because his biggest crime in life was poverty. And you know, so that's, but it's interesting to see where you come from, and you know, yeah, it was really, really, really good. So I would say to anybody to do a DNA test. They're so cheap now, really, as well. It's not out of reach, and the state can hide things and they can do, but the truth always has a way of coming out at the end of the day.
You've no anger, Francis, that I can see. There's hurt, but you're not angry.
No, no, I would be hurt, yeah, absolutely. And I would, I'd have, like I said, I until I met my partner, which I was very lucky, really, really was, because I was 28 years of age and I was going down a very, very bad, even though I was always worked. I don't know how, sometimes I did work, but I always worked. But I was in danger of going down a very, very slippery slope. And, but no, yeah, I'm hurt, but I don't have anger. I don't think it's productive. I don't think there's, a brother of mine said he had kept in touch with one of the nuns, and she died a few years ago. I didn't keep in touch with them, but he was more or less with her, you know, a few days before she died, and he told me that she was very sorry that she hadn't kept us together. So it didn't, I mean, look, it's in the past now, and it's not going to change anything, but
it helps to hear it.
Yeah, well, I suppose, yeah. I mean, look, it's acknowledgement of any type is what everybody wants, isn't it, really? And yeah, I mean, look, you often do think, you know, what would things have been like, what would life have been like, but you can't change it. You have to, the only thing now we can do, as I keep saying, is build a better society going forward.